Good afternoon. My name is John Kaiser. We'll get started here in just a little bit. I want to wait till right at 1 o'clock before we get started. Good afternoon. My name is John Kaiser. I'm the Private Lands Program Administrator with the Ohio Division of Wildlife. And basically having this web event here today to talk primarily about the Wildlife Habitat Initiative, which is a RCPP project, Regional Conservation Partnership Program project, funded by NRCS. And so we have this project's being spearheaded, and the primary partner on this project is the National Bobwhite and Grasslands Initiative Foundation. We're going to start off with introductions here in a little bit, but prior to doing that, just a couple things I want to let everybody know. There's a time delay on this web event, so about 20 to 30-second time delay, just to let you know. At the end of the presentation, we will be doing questions and answers. So you should see a question and answer option on your display. You have the options to submit questions, and we'll try to get through those best we can after we complete the main presentation. This web event is being recorded. So we're recording this, of course, on Microsoft Teams, and some members of our communications staff will be most likely uploading it to YouTube, but basically a website to host it, and I'll be emailing that out along with any other pertinent information about the Wildlife Habitat Initiative. And there may be a bit of a delay getting that out. State Fair starts this week, and a lot of our communication folks are going to be very busy with that, but we'll try to get that uploaded and out as soon as possible. Without further ado, I want to turn it over to Kyle Martins here to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for everyone on the call. I'm Kyle Martins. I'm the National Coordinator for the RCPP with NBGIF. I will throw it, I think, over to Cheryl next, if I may.
Good afternoon. I'm Cheryl Rice. I am the Regional Conservation Partnership Program Coordinator for Ohio NRCS, and it's glad to see everybody on.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Gardner. I am the State RCPP Coordinator here in Ohio with the National Bobwhite Grassland Initiative Foundation. John and I will be going through this presentation together. And like John said, please put your questions in the Q&A. We'll have those moderated, and we will be addressing those at the end of the presentation. So, John, are we over to the presentation now?
Yes, we are. We're ready to go.
All right. So yeah, as John said, the Wildlife Habitat Initiative is funded through RCPP. That stands for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. That is through USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. And as mentioned, NBGIF and the Ohio Division of Wildlife are partnering in that to deliver this program to landowners. So a little more in depth about the background of what the Wildlife Habitat Initiative is. As mentioned, this is funded through USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. This particular grant gave Ohio $9 million to administer to landowners for wildlife habitat work over the next 4 years. So this grant goes until 2029. So we have a little under 4 years at this point, but a lot of money to be going out here for landowners for habitat, which is great, a great opportunity. As mentioned, the administration of this program is through the NBGI Foundation. I'll be the main point of contact for the program administration and contracting for landowners for NBGIF. And I will be bringing on some delivery specialists to also help in that effort in the future. And then the folks that will be in the field working day to day with landowners for technical assistance and project planning will be through the Division of Wildlife with their 13 wildlife management consultants. And there will be 20 wildlife specialists working with county soil and water conservation districts that will also be helping out in this effort. John, I'm going to pass it back to you to go through the goals and objectives.
Sure. So goals and objectives for this program, primarily to increase wildlife habitat on private lands. Focus primarily on upland habitats. We'll get more into this a little bit. Forested habitat could also be included, but we're primarily looking at early successional forest land to be included. Like I said, we'll get in more depth with that in a little bit, but our primary focus is primarily grassland, pollinator, upland habitat. The focus is on improving habitat for bobwhite, ringneck pheasants, grassland birds, and other pollinators. And so we definitely want to reach a broad variety of landowners and land managers, so farmers, grazing operations and other producers, forest land managers, recreational land managers, and beginning farmers and HU, historically underserved producers. Definitely focusing on an efficient and high quality customer service is really where we want to try to emphasize a lot of our efforts. This is going to be a continuous sign up for this program, streamlined project planning and contracting process through a digital process, and limited points of contacts for participants. So we're really trying to, we're definitely going to be, and when I say we, the Division of Wildlife staff and wildlife management consultants and soil and water conservation district wildlife specialists in those counties mentioned, or the 20 counties. Primarily, working with landowners, very similar to like we would do with EQIP. One of the big differences here is that instead of a landowner coming into the office, the NRCS office, the soil and water office to initiate this project, you can simply just pass this on to a wildlife management consultant or wildlife specialist. And we'll get into more detail with this a little bit, but I just kind of want to hit it up front, is that the contracting process is separate from conservation desktop and cart. We'll get into more on that in a little bit, but just kind of wanted to throw that out there right in front. We also, with this project, tend to measure outcomes and additional outputs, especially in Preble County. Preble County, as you'll find out a little bit more here in a little bit, is a focal county where we're trying to measure the outcomes. So we'll be tracking quantities of practices installed, tracking landowner and biologist effort. Clemson University has been monitoring grassland bird populations, habitat metrics, and social dynamics. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, John. So to just go into that monitoring a little bit more, to kind of show the outcomes that we're hoping to measure, along with the outputs. So Clemson, as John mentioned, is doing this monitoring. They are a partner of the foundation and the host university for NBGI. So they have been in the focal counties in each of these states, with Preble County being our focal county here in Ohio. They are going to be deploying about 200 automated recording units, ARUs for short, in Preble County through the primary nesting and breeding season of bobwhite for the length of this grant. They started that effort this year and just wrapped that up a couple weeks ago to kind of get a baseline of what the grassland bird populations look like within the county. Those ARUs what they do is they capture bird songs, and then they can use computer softwares to identify the calls that the ARUs detect. And along with that, they are conducting point counts for some ground truthing for their software to make sure that they're getting accurate results from that. They will also be coming out with some landowner satisfaction surveys to be used down the road to see folks' satisfaction not only with the WHI but other conservation programs they're in. Looking at some citizen science as well through eBird and the breeding bird survey data, just kind of cross-referencing the data that's collected versus the data that they're getting from citizen science. Clemson is also doing land cover and habitat surveys on a yearly basis, along with the grassland bird population monitoring, to kind of show the changes in land use and habitat metrics over time as compared to what the populations of these grassland birds are doing. And the habitat delivery within that, it's a big partnership, right? So the Division of Wildlife, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, NRCS, and everyone who's working in conservation in the state really are key partners in all of this. And even when it comes down to the monitoring, we've seen great partnership between a bunch of agencies at the local level as well as at the state level. So getting back to the nuts and bolts of the program. So this is how it works. There's some similarities and some differences with Farm Bill programs that you may be familiar with, specifically to the RCPP Wildlife Habitat Initiative. Our funding, the $9 million in funding, that is split into 3 funding pools for the state. The Coordinated Implementation Program focal county is Preble County, as we've mentioned. There's a funding pool for historically underserved. Those are some identified counties, and within those, the historically underserved producers within those counties. And then the third funding pool is the remainder of the state. And then some included practices, similar to what you might see through the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, the EQIP program. Pollinator habitat is going to be, a focal practice of ours, right? That makes good upland habitat, native grass forages for livestock, tree and shrub plantings, brush management, prescribed fire, early successional habitat for sand improvement, and more. So you notice there is a mixture of grassland practices as well as some forest management. By getting over to our notable differences from other Farm Bill programs, we are utilizing the subset of NRCS practices that are wildlife centric. And even though we have forestry practices in there, we are focused on grassland and early successional habitats. Our focus is grassland birds for this program. So we did this to allow folks to still do some forestry work, some good work in their forest land, with the understanding that we expect some uplands and grasslands to get enhanced or established as well through the program. As mentioned before, the Division of Wildlife and the Soil and Water Conservation District wildlife specialists are handling all the landowner interactions and technical assistance, and then NBGIF is administering the contracts and payments for the program. One big difference we'd like to point out is our incentive rates are at 95% of the NRCS scenario rates for each practice. So those are pretty attractive rates for landowners to help incentivize the work to be done. Mostly paperless process. So this program will be done almost entirely through our project management software called Striven. So their contracts, their payments, that will all be done digitally, outside of any hard copies that the WMCs and wildlife specialists choose to provide the landowners for technical assistance. Everything else will be done and provided electronically. We offer a simplified contract between the landowner and the foundation. So our contracts are as streamlined and easy to understand as possible while still retaining all the needed information that a contract inherently needs to include. AGI waivers. We'll talk about this more in detail in a little bit, but the grant does have an AGI waiver for the entire program. Essentially, that means that folks who may not be eligible for other Farm Bill programs because of the income limitations will still be able to participate in this program. However, they still will need to have their AGI updated and certified with FSA on an annual basis, which we will touch on more in a little bit. One other big difference is the entire project management process and ranking is being completed by the wildlife management consultants and the wildlife specialists. Pretty big change from things being done in Conservation Desktop and CART like it is through NRCS. That gives our consultants and wildlife specialists the ability to go through and complete that ranking and give that landowner a good idea of if they have a quality project or not that will get funded for us. And hopefully that streamlines the process a little bit as well to get their projects underway quicker. And then lastly, John mentioned this, we do have a truly continuous sign up. So we will be taking offers through this program nonstop. So we don't have to worry about sign up periods or ranking periods or batches of sign up, which should help folks keep cycling through. And again, the whole goal for high quality customer service there is so they know in a quick fashion whether or not their project will be funded through this program. So to get a little deeper into our funding pools, so the map here on the screen, you'll see is color coordinated. So the blue county being Preble County is mentioned, that's our CIP focal county, where a third of the funding is going to go and also where Clemson's monitoring is taking place. The green counties were the historically underserved counties that were identified by our HU partner. So within those counties, the folks who are historically underserved get their own funding pool. And then the rest of the counties will be within the statewide pool. It's worth mentioning that even though we have our focal county, our HU counties, and as we'll see in a little bit, our game bird priority areas, it's worth mentioning that all 88 counties are eligible for this program. So just because you may not be in any of these areas that we're focusing on does not mean your landowners cannot get a hold of their wildlife management consultant or wildlife specialist and attempt to sign up their property. So as I mentioned, each of these pools receive 1/3 of the total funds, and that breaks down to about $1.8 million per year per funding pool. So again, this is a very good opportunity for folks interested in wildlife habitat. It's a very good chunk of money that we received in our grant to administer and get to our landowners to help get habitat on the ground. Each funding pool also has its own Act Now threshold in the ranking criteria. So that's adjusted in a way to help ensure that our goal of targeted conservation is attainable, right? So each of those will have thresholds dependent on what funding pool you're in. So we are funding things in appropriate amounts to hit our goals for both financial goals and, of course, goals of getting habitat on the ground. And as I mentioned, Preble County includes those monitoring efforts from Clemson as well. So we talked about targeted conservation. I just want to highlight it again here. So this map you are seeing now, it has those same counties highlighted as before, but you'll also notice that there are townships highlighted in pink, and then there are those red and yellow circles throughout a good part of the southern, central, and northwestern corner of the state. So the pink townships are the Working Lands for Wildlife Quail Priority Townships. We decided to include those in our ranking criteria. So folks within those townships will receive higher ranking points. Again, since Working Lands for Wildlife has a good framework for knowing where focal areas should be for bobwhite, we decided to incorporate that. The red and yellow circles are the grassland game bird detection data from the Division of Wildlife. That includes both bobwhite and ringneck pheasants. And since we are focusing on grassland birds, we decided to include all that detection data, and anybody within those areas will also be receiving higher ranking. And then we recognize, again, this is a statewide program. All 88 counties are eligible, and we want good quality projects in good areas across the state to increase their habitat too for other grassland songbirds, pollinators, wild turkeys. So what we have also done to try to include other folks and get them more points in the ranking is we've included questions pertaining to the proximity to permanently protected habitats to give them higher ranking as well. And some examples there being our state wildlife areas, state forest, parks that are designated to habitat, whether that's state metro parks or county parks, and then other permanently protected properties dedicated to habitat, such as the Nature Conservancy properties. And then again, because we want to increase, our habitat mosaic on the landscape, we are giving more points to projects adjacent to existing grasslands, whether that is adjacent to public lands containing grasslands, neighboring properties containing grasslands, or for folks who have existing grasslands on their property, whether it is through another program or just an existing grassland that they maintain on their own. And here we'll show the practice list that we have available to our participants. So if you're familiar with the NRCS practices, these should all look very familiar. Again, this is a small subset of overall NRCS practices, but these are the ones we identified as being wildlife centric that we wanted to use for this program. And then the ones that have the highlighted notes, those are showing that we have some additional sidebars on those practices that don't necessarily pertain to other Farm Bill programs. So we're focused highly on native species for our plantings. As we know, our grassland birds do better and thrive in our natives plantings more so than introduced. The cover crop, you'll notice multi-species only and paired with 645 deferred acres. We are going to get into that here in a bit with our unique practice that we are coining the wildlife cover crop. And then for structures for wildlife, you'll notice it's brush piles, down tree structures, and edge feathering. We don't have any sort of nesting boxes or bat boxes in this program. And now we're going to get into everybody's favorite, eligibility requirements. So this is a grant funded by the USDA, and therefore producers must meet all USDA eligibility requirements. And these are all laid out in here, having to be the owner or renter of the land being offered, or a member of an entity with signatory authority who owns the land. They must have records established and updated with the Farm Service Agency, their local FSA office in their county. And those needed forms are there, again, that they would need to have set up for anybody who's on the call who is an FSA employee. Essentially, they need to have all the same records set up that they would need to participate in other NRCS programs, such as EQIP or CSP. You'll notice that those 941 forms are listed there. Again, those are the adjusted gross income forms. yes, we have a waiver that says that they can be exempt from the limitation, but they still need to fill those forms out and have them updated with FSA to be eligible. And also, this must be on eligible land. The biggest thing here, that must be private land. So there's private agricultural land, non-industrial private forest land, or other associated private land. We cannot apply this to any lands enrolled in CRP, CSP, or WRE. So whatever acres are within those programs are not eligible for the Wildlife Habitat Initiative through this RCPP. And then under EQIP contracts, it can be done, but only under certain circumstances can they have contracts going on at the same time. We cannot apply duplicative practices, so we cannot do same practices on the same acres as they might be doing through EQIP or have recently completed through EQIP. And Cheryl at the state office and her team will be checking that duplication. She will be coordinating with the local offices as appropriate to check that duplication as well, just to make sure that we are not going to get into a double dipping scenario that could end up being bad for the landowner and cause some issues internally as well. And then next we have our internal requirements set by the foundation and the Division of Wildlife. So here's our stipulation that ensures that we are getting some early successional habitat on the ground. So we're going to require at least 25% of the contracted acres to be in early successional habitat. Examples being grassland, shrubland, young forest that's less than 10 years in succession, anything that's going to allow for some herbaceous cover of grasses and forbs to grow and be beneficial to these grassland birds that we are focusing on. Again, this is the acreage just in the contract, not necessarily the entire property. I just want to be very specific here. This could be confusing to folks, but for example, if someone owns 100 acres of land, but they are only going to offer 10 acres through the Wildlife Habitat Initiative, we are going to require that 2.5 acres to be grassland or early successional habitat. They do not need to have 25 acres of their 100 acres as early successional. Again, it is only the percentage of the acres being offered. Again, we did this so folks who had forested land that they wanted to do some work in still had the opportunity to do so, especially thinking about eastern and southern Ohio. Then our second bit of eligibility internally is our acreage minimums. And again, these are set thinking about that targeted conservation that we're trying to get. So in Preble County, we have a 2-acre minimum for offered contracts. Our historically underserved funding pool, thinking about some of our historically underserved producers that may not own large tracts of land. We aren't setting a minimum. However, whatever practices they're offering will need to adhere to any minimums that might be set in NRCS's practice standards. And then for the remainder of the state, the minimum to be offered for this program is 5 acres. And John, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you, Matt. So when can landowners get started? Farmers and landowners can enroll now. Matt will talk a little bit about where we are with training with our staff in a little bit, but we have at least 13, we have 13 of our wildlife management consultants and 7 SWC wildlife specialists that are ready to enroll. The remainder staff will be briefed and trained in coming months, so that's yet to come. But the good thing is, no matter what county you're in the state, or a landowner or farmer wants to enroll, we've got coverage and we're ready to start now. I will add to this that we haven't broadcast this information. We have not sent a news release out yet, but primary reason is we wanted to make sure that we get all of our agency partners and conservation organizations that we work with closely and that are helping landowners with conservation projects on their land know about these details, about this program, what it is, all the specifics prior to us putting the word out that this program is available. But it's open now. Next slide, Matt. So how does a landowner enroll? Like I said, by contacting a wildlife management consultant. Some of you have probably already seen, if you open the fact sheet, you'll see that this is what it looks like as far as the contacts on the back at the side of that fact sheet with our wildlife management consultant directory. As mentioned, we've got wildlife specialists helping with this too. And the way we're going to work with that is our wildlife management consultants will hand pertinent projects down to wildlife specialists in counties where we have them. We also, so next step, establish and or update records at FSA. It's very, very important to get the ball rolling. So NBGIF and the Division of Wildlife have developed, guide sheets and checklists to help new participants navigate this. So it's part of our training to move that along. Wildlife management consultants and wildlife specialists will work with them to determine NBGIF eligibility and begin the planning process. So hook them up with the wildlife management consultant, wildlife specialist, and get rolling. Next slide. So how can you assist, whether you are working for the Soil and Water Conservation District or NRCS office or OSU Extension or other conservation organizations that working with landowners? First of all, just help spread the word. The news release will be forthcoming, but help distribute fact sheets. Distribution to local offices is coming soon. We actually have hard copies printed up, and our wildlife management consultants will be delivering those to your offices through the course of the next couple of weeks. You got newsletters, Facebook, social media. Help us spread the word once we get that news release out. And of course, word of mouth, it's a really good way. So send landowners our way, of course, wildlife management or wildlife focused projects. Matt was mentioned, we all mentioned before, the focus on upland, grassland, pollinators, but forest land is eligible, but you get that 25% early successional habitat work. So even if you have a landowner that has primarily forest land, if they're willing to open their canopy with, like a small patch clear cut or edge feathering, they could be eligible. Or if they have other land that they'd be willing to enroll in the pollinator, as long as we have 25% of the area in early successional cover, they'll be eligible. Those who struggle to fit in or rank high enough in other programs may be a good fit for this. Also provide them the wildlife management consultant, wildlife specialist contact information, and like I said, provide them a fact sheet. So I'll pass it back to you, Matt.
Thanks, John. So I mentioned briefly in our practice list our wildlife cover crop practice, pretty unique, something we want to try. There are some states out west that have been implementing a similar practice, focusing on mainly pheasants out there, but other grassland and ground nesting birds too. So this practice is put together to be like a short-term practice for cropland, right? Especially for folks who may be thinking about retiring some land, putting it into program, aren't sure how it works in their operation, could be a good fit for them to not be in a long-term agreement, kind of like a gateway practice, if you will, to more conservation down the road. But ultimately, the goal of this is to create brooding habitat during the growing season in areas where we have grassland game birds. So you'll see that it's the 340 cover crop paired with that deferred acre payment. That equals our wildlife cover crop. And those rates you see there are the current rates for fiscal year 2025. So this comes with the caveat that these rates could change as we get updated scenario rates from NRCS in the coming fiscal years. But that is how it sits right now for our payments. It is worth noting that this practice will only be eligible for producers within these grassland bird priority areas that we looked at before. So all those areas, the pink townships or the red and yellow circles, are where this will be eligible. So they will have to have their cropland within those areas to be eligible. And our wildlife management consultants and wildlife specialists will be able to tell this to all the way down to the farm level for how we have this layer loaded into our ESRI account. So again, just thinking targeted conservation here. We want to put this on the ground where we know that there are populations of wild pheasants and quail. And we're going to limit this to 50 acres per field. Again, just trying to be targeted and conservative with this and put good practices on good acres that are going to make a difference, but yet not be wasteful and overspend where it may not be needed. On the same vein there, we want this to be adjacent to nesting habitat. So, you know, we just don't need this floating out there in the middle of no man's land where these birds would not be able to readily move their brood from their nesting site to the brood ring cover. So whether that is an adjacent field border, old field, you know, anything that they're doing through other programs or not, as long as we're not overlapping the acreage, that's where this wildlife cover crop could be put. It's worth noting that the deferred acre payment does require monitoring and management on that land. So we will be developing a survey 123 for folks to survey some of the vegetative metrics and wildlife metrics they're seeing out there, and documenting that as part of that payment. And then those incentive payments will be paid after the termination date, which we have set as March 15th or later to get through the winter. The goal for this is to get essentially one full growing season of brood ring cover, but also get the overwintering cover for wildlife as well. So our goal there is to get through that harshest part of winter and let them terminate if they're going back into row crop after that. And then once we know that we've gotten that cover standing for as long as we want, that's when that incentive payment will be made. And one thing we wanted to put on here is the cover crop may not be harvested. So just going a little bit further into these mixes. So there will be cool season and warm season mixes available. Both will be options as to diversify planting and termination dates. So we can fit into as many operations, crop rotation as possible. So our three options that we have right now is our planting after wheat harvest, which would likely occur in July or August. That's going to have a 9-month duration, catching the end of that brood rearing season through the winter and then terminated the following spring. However, if you do this option, you would only get the cover crop incentive, not the deferred acres, because you did harvest that wheat in the same crop. So I just want to make that clear for that option. And then the other two options are where the paired practices come in. Option 2, planting in early to mid-June to meet the planting date requirements for a lot of those warm season covers. That's going to give us standing cover through the majority of the brood rearing season, and they are going to be deferring their row crop for that year, which is why they're eligible for that deferred payment. And then the last option there is planting after soybean harvest in September, early October. Again, looking at timeframes to where we can plant these covers within the approved seeding window. It's noticeable with that third option that it's a longer duration on that, right? Because if we're planting in September or early October, we're missing that year's broodering season. So that cover crop is going to overwinter and then remain standing the following growing season. And then through the next winter. So you have a 1.5 year duration on that third option, which is considerably longer than the first two options that are about 9 to 10 months. And then our allowable species that, and for our mixes that we will have for this, and our fact sheet is still in development. So for the species, we are still working through that and brainstorming that. You know, our goal here is to have seed mixes that meet all of NRCS's standards and specs for cover crops, but will also give the benefit to our grassland birds that we need through broodering in winter cover. So we're still troubleshooting and working through that to ensure we're getting the best of both worlds. So are we robbing Peter to pay Paul here? Is what this Wildlife Habitat Initiative is doing, is this going to take away from other conservation programs? You know, are we going to take people from EQIP? Are we competing with EQIP or CSP or CRP? And the answer is no, right? We don't want this to be a competition. We want this to be a collaboration between this program and the other Farm Bill programs out there, because ultimately our goal is more habitat on the ground, right? And if we take away from other programs, you know, we're not getting that outcome, right? We're just replacing acres, we're not adding acres. So how does this work so we're not competitive? Again, that targeted conservation is the big one, right? There's a lot of these areas where we're focusing on, it's going to have people rank higher, and it's going to give big benefits to those grassland birds, even though it is open statewide. And again, we cannot complete the same practices on the same acres for multiple programs, so we don't have to worry about any overlap there. Again, not wasting any of this funding. And again, this program is here for folks who may have a hard time getting into other programs, just for whatever situation they may have. EQIP has been very popular the past few years, which is great. And the fact that NRCS is spending all the money in those funding pools is fantastic. We love to see it, but we're here for the folks who aren't fortunate enough to get in, right? So that's where we're trying to be additive. And lastly, you know, we're still focused on grassland and early successional habitat. So those folks who are really only interested in their forested land and they're really still looking at doing brush management, forest stand improvement, not looking to do a whole lot of early successional or upland work, you know, they should still go through EQIP or another program to get that work done. So just these last couple slides here are our contacts page. So this is all the contacts for the 20 counties in the state that have a wildlife specialist on their soil and water conservation district staff. The map on the left there is color coded. The green counties, those wildlife specialists have been briefed and trained through our project management system and are available to start working with landowners and can complete these projects independently. Obviously, they can still collaborate with their wildlife management consultant if they choose to do so, but they are able to start the process themselves and get going. The counties in yellow, those folks are not yet trained. We will be training them in the coming months. But that's not to say they can't help landowners out with this, right? They can coordinate with their wildlife management consultant and work through these together, even if they can't enter them through our project management software. They can still point them in the right direction. And then again, I just wanted to throw up the map of our 13 wildlife management consultants in the state as the primary contacts for this program. This map shows their counties of coverage and has their names and contact information, as well as a link directly to ODNR's website for this page. So that kind of brings us to the end of the presentation. I just want to recognize all the folks and partners that make not only this presentation and webinar, but also the program possible. So you can see there on the left all the folks who helped out today and have helped throughout this process, and all the partner agencies there that have been crucial in this effort. And with that, I thank you for attending today and being attentive. My contact information and John's contact information is there on the screen. If you have questions about the program at a high level, please feel free to get a hold of us anytime. And then again, if you have landowners interested, please feel free to give the wildlife management consultant or wildlife specialist contact information for them. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for any questions we may have. If there's any in the Q&A session.
Looks like we're waiting for some to come in, and we've got this time delay here. So likewise, I want to thank all of the agencies and organizations that Matt had listed on the previous slide with the acknowledgments. Cheryl Rice has been a really big help for us in getting this off the ground and managing this not only in Ohio, but she's also helping manage this for other states too. So really appreciate that. I did not mention that the news release for this program is actually going to be released here most likely here early August, but still possibility it might go out yet this week or next week, but that should be coming soon. When we get that, I'll be sharing that with you all. We'll just wait a little bit longer here for any questions that come in.
So I'm seeing a question came in. What has the turnaround time been between application and contract signing so far? And that's a very good question. It has varied, and there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, we were piloting this program. It's brand new. You know, we're working out some kinks in the process, right? It's just been a learning curve, but for what we've got done so far, it's been a few months. But inherently, that's just the process, right? The landowner needs to do their part in getting their records established or updated with FSA. Landowners are busy. FSA is busy, especially during the time of the year when these pilots started. FSA had a lot of deadlines. And then, like, they just got through crop reporting here not too long ago. So, those things all make it vary, right, for them getting those set up. And then just how quickly we can get those things set up, determine how quickly they can be deemed eligible, because we can't confirm eligibility until all of those boxes are checked, right? So it's varied. I will say that what we have worked out on paper is showing about 3 months would be the best case scenario for getting from application to a contract. And again, that's assuming everything can be done fairly quickly. We're going to strive to do that and keep to that as much as possible. But especially here at the beginning, as we're getting everything ironed out, it may be a little longer. And I just encourage people that, especially for the first few contracts in their county that people are going to come through, that they be patient with us as we work through some of these things. But yeah, very good question. It also depends on how they rank, right? So we do have that act now threshold for each funding pool. So just because they don't hit that does not necessarily mean that they'll never get into the program. They may just have to wait until we fund everybody who hits that threshold. And then if we still have money to spend for that period of time, we'll go down the list and reevaluate and fund some more people based on score. We will likely be doing that throughout the year. Hopefully envisioning quarterly intervals on that. The goal there just to stay on track financially, right, with what we want to spend, but at the same time getting our higher quality projects funded first. Good question.
I'll just add to that, excuse me, just a little bit. Matt talked about ranking, and we're not using CART, the Conservation Assessments ranking tool, to rank these. We've got a pretty simplified spreadsheet that we're using to rank these, so you can figure out what somebody's going to rank pretty rapidly, pretty quick, based upon, as long as they at least have an idea of what they want to do with their project.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, John. And I just did a quick count from when we started the process with a couple of folks to when a contract was offered. And it looked like for these first few, it was around 5 to 6 months from first contact and the site visit to an offered contract. So that's where we're sitting right now. Again, in an ideal world, we could potentially get that as quickly as 3 months. But there's a lot of variables that could slow that down.
We'll wait about probably, let's say, another couple minutes here just for any other questions that come in. And if we don't receive any, we'll finish up.
I see a question here that, Cheryl, you might have to field this one. It asks about, did they need to unclick seek funding? Since this is CRP, I'm not sure the guidance there.
Yeah, so none of the planning is going to be done in our software. So I guess the clicking, where the clicking's getting done, isn't going to be done by any of our field office staff or any of our folks. So I guess the answer would be no.
Thank you, Cheryl. Is there a 12-month practice completion requirement? Yes, there is. So similar to EQIP, we are requiring the first practice to be completed within 12 months of a signed contract. Good question. Let's see. Even though CART will not be used, will NRCS be aware of active contracts? I believe, Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong, but the answer is yes. NRCS will be aware of all active contracts through this RCPP.
So yeah, so there's a requirement that we have in the Farm Bill for duplication of payments. So we do check both on the front end and prior to payment to make sure there's no duplication. So we will be aware of the contract.
Great questions. We'll stick around, see if some more come in here. Stick around on here just another minute unless some other questions come through.
We just got one question here. Does this program work with CAUV? This is a very good question. from our understanding from the checking we did, this being a federally funded conservation program, those lands enrolled in this should be identified by the auditors the same way that they would identify any land enrolled in EQIP. So it should work the same way. As far as the AUV goes, there is verbiage within our contract with the landowner that identifies this land in the contract as a federally funded conservation program through USDA NRCS. So that was the verbiage we had done the research on and found that should help those auditors identify that correct land designation. Again, it might take some explaining with the auditors because will be new to them too. So we will work through that, but we have included what we can on our end to help them identify it correctly.
Great question. Let's stick around a couple minutes for any more. Or waiting on any other questions to come in here, I just want to add, I mentioned earlier that the fact sheets have been printed up and we'll be distributing those, but that does not mean that you have to wait for them to arrive. The fact sheets are on a basically 11 by 17 sheet of paper, and you can simply print them out yourself if you wish and just fold them over once into that booklet format, and that would suffice. So feel free to do so and share the information. Got a nice comment there. Appreciate that. We'll stick around just probably about one more minute just to make sure there's no more questions coming through.
Well, not seeing any more, John. I think we can go ahead and wrap this up and let folks get back to their day. So again, on behalf of the foundation, I'd really like to thank everybody for taking the time to sit into the webinar today. I hope it was valuable and informational. And if there are any questions that come to mind when you're thinking about this afterwards, obviously feel free to reach out to me, and I'm sure John would feel the same. So looks like something else just came in, John. Our auditor will allow in CAUV only if it abates erosion. Good comment. I guess each county auditor might have their own interpretation. Kyle, I don't know if you have any guidance here, but I would say we've done what we can in our contract wording to help them identify this as conservation cover. And we all know that conservation covers can help erosion, even though that's not the focus of this program. So I don't have great advice on how to navigate that specific situation. If anybody else has input, feel free to give it.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Matt. I think that's the best thing you can do is just show that how the practice does abate erosion. And yeah, every auditor makes those decisions. So we got 88 people, 88 auditors in the state that are making these decisions. So I encourage you to work with them the best you possibly can and refer back to Ohio Revised Code and if needed. So well, with that, I think we'll wrap up today. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And like I said, we'll try to get this posted up on a web hosting site for you and others to access when needed. Feel free to contact Matt or myself if you have any follow-up questions. Have a great day. Thank you very much.